They were promised a green future, a future that was clean, prosperous, and secure. It was called Europe's man-on-the-moon moment, a grand vision to make the continent the first to be climate neutral by 2050. But that promise is colliding with a brutal reality. Across the continent, millions are facing a crushing cost of living crisis, fueled by some of the highest energy bills in the developed world. They were told the green transition would create jobs and save the planet. Instead, for many, it feels like a story of how Europe's ambitious climate goals have left its economy on the brink and its people in the cold. Before we dive into the data, take a sip of coffee. This is where the story changes. The numbers paint a stark picture. Europe's energy prices have become so high, they're creating a devastating competitive disadvantage. While the goal was to lead the world in green technology, Europe now leads in the cost of keeping the lights on. For the industries that power its economy, average electricity prices in the EU are now roughly twice those in the United States, and significantly higher than in China. In 2024, industrial electricity prices in the EU hit nearly 20 cents per kilowatt hour, compared to just 8 cents in China and 7.5 cents in the US. This isn't just a problem for big corporations. It's a crisis for every household and small business. This wasn't supposed to happen. The promise of renewables was cheap, abundant energy from the sun and wind. Yet even with a massive renewable build-out, the reality for consumers and businesses is a constant grinding pressure of unaffordable costs. The green promise of prosperity is being buried under a mountain of bills. The consequences of these sky-high energy prices are terrifying, particularly for Europe's industrial heartland. We are witnessing what many now fear is the deindustrialization of Germany, once the undisputed economic powerhouse of the continent. High energy prices are forcing businesses from chemical giants to the famed auto sector to downsize, pack up, and move abroad where energy is more stable and affordable. Take BASF, a global chemical giant. It recently announced plans to permanently downsize its main operations in Germany, citing unbearably high energy costs, while expanding production in China and the US. Germany's iconic automotive industry is also struggling, with energy costs for the sector having surged in recent years. Over the past few years, Germany's industrial base has shed hundreds of thousands of jobs. And according to the German Chamber of Commerce and Industry, a growing share of manufacturers are now weighing production cuts or leaving the country altogether. This isn't just a German story. Across Europe, energy-intensive sectors like metals, chemicals, and manufacturing are facing a fundamental threat to their existence. Companies are being forced to choose between staying in Europe and staying in business. The very industrial base that built Europe's wealth is now at risk of being dismantled, one factory at a time, priced out by the continent's own energy policies. So how did a plan for a green utopia lead to an economic emergency? The answer lies in a series of strategic gambles and geopolitical shocks that created a perfect storm. First, the energy gamble. Many European nations, most notably Germany, made the fateful decision to phase out reliable power sources like nuclear energy before a viable replacement was fully in place. Following the Fukushima disaster in 2011, Germany accelerated its plan to close all nuclear plants, a process completed in April 2023. Studies suggest this lost nuclear production was replaced primarily by burning more fossil fuels and importing power, which drove up both prices and, in some cases, emissions. Second, the transition relied heavily on intermittent renewable sources like wind and solar. While these technologies are crucial, they aren't available 24/7. When the wind doesn't blow or the sun doesn't shine, the grid needs backup, which often comes from expensive natural gas plants. This intermittency creates extreme price volatility, making it nearly impossible for energy-intensive industries to operate competitively. Third, this fragile system was shattered by a massive geopolitical shock. For years, Europe had built its energy strategy on the assumption of cheap Russian gas. Before 2022, Russia supplied approximately 40 to 45% of the EU's gas imports. When Russia invaded Ukraine, that supply was choked off and the house of cards collapsed. Gas prices surged and Europe was sent scrambling for expensive alternatives, exposing its critical dependence on unpredictable suppliers. Finally, there's the staggering cost of the transition itself. A recent report by Mario Draghi for the EU suggests that an additional annual investment of 750 to 800 billion euros is needed to revitalize Europe's competitiveness, with a huge portion dedicated to the green transition. This includes hundreds of billions just for grid upgrades to handle decentralized intermittent renewables. These immense costs are ultimately passed down to consumers and businesses, fueling the crisis Europe now faces. The economic pain is now morphing into a potent political backlash. Across the continent, the European Green Deal is facing growing resistance from citizens and industries who feel they are bearing an unfair burden. This greenlash is reshaping the political landscape, fueling the rise of parties who campaign against what they frame as elitist climate policies that harm ordinary workers. In response, governments are beginning to shift their tone. While the EU maintains its climate goals are on track, the focus is changing. The bloc has launched a clean industrial deal, which places a renewed emphasis on competitiveness and affordable energy. A subtle but significant shift. Some analysts believe this new focus could narrow or weaken parts of the original Green Deal agenda. The rhetoric has changed from saving the planet at any cost to saving jobs and industry from collapse. There is now an open acknowledgement that high energy prices pose a fundamental threat to European companies. The debate over Europe's energy future is one of the most critical issues of our time. It's a story with profound implications for the economy, geopolitics, and the global effort to combat climate change. Europe stands at a crossroads. It has made some progress in reducing emissions, which is a significant achievement. However, a January 2025 report from the EU's own research center found that while 32 of the Green Deal's 154 targets are on track, 64 need acceleration and 15 are not progressing at all, suggesting the road ahead is difficult. The Green Promise was for a seamless transition to a modern, prosperous, and sustainable economy. But the reality has been a harsh lesson in unintended consequences. The continent traded dependency on Russian gas for a dependency on intermittent energy and global supply chains, all while its industries risk losing their ability to compete on the world stage. The ambitious goal of becoming the world's first climate-neutral continent remains, but the path to get there is now fraught with economic peril and political division. The Green Promise was meant to secure Europe's future. We want to know what you think. Is the high cost of Europe's green transition a necessary price to pay, or a fatal flaw in its strategy? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want to see more deep dives into the economic forces shaping our world, make sure to subscribe. History rhymes. Power rebrands. Stay inquisitive.